And welcome to another edition of our college football conference previews from a handicapping perspective here on College Sports Rush. I'm Jimmy Yott, along with Paul Stone, veteran college football handicapper. We looked at the SEC, we looked at the the Big Ten, and now we look at the ACC plus Notre Dame. That's right. The Irish play six conference games every year since they rework their schedule. And Paul, let's start at the top, and that is the Clemson Tigers. Clemson got a break the break they needed to get into the ACC championship game when Syracuse upset Miami up in upstate New York. That got them in, and they jumped all over SMU. SMU rallies to tie it up, but then a long 50-plus yard field goal at the gun wins it for Dabo Swinney. Not only that, but then they go to Texas, and not they didn't cover the spread that day, but man, Kyle Klubnik looked really good. He kept them in the game in that one, and that is really, I think, our last impression of Klubnik in a good season as well. You got to be careful of some of the weaker teams that they played and some of those stats that were compiled along the way. But doing it on a big stage like he did against SMU, against Texas at Texas, is got a lot of people's attention and respect. You look at Clemson, first of all, they open up with LSU. They're currently a 4.5 point favorite, depending on where you shop there. But Clemson minus 125 to win the ACC. I've got some context over at Clemson. They think this is the best offensive line that they've had. That's in the Dabo Swinney era. And, man, they've had some really good got a ton of collective starts coming back. The quarterback is good, and he is experienced with multiple years of experience, and he showed a spike in his second full season of starting. The defensive front is highly thought of. Comparisons to 2018, I'm a little bit reluctant on that. We know they have a couple of first rounders up there, defensive tackle, defensive end, another who will hopefully be more healthy and available this year, and another transfer, more the capable transfer coming in from Purdue. The front is really good. Not sure if it's 2018 good because they gave up more yards per rushing than Clemson has in 25 years over there. The roster is maxed out. So at Dabo Swinney's comments at ACC Media Days, we got everybody back. And then a couple of additions. And not only that, because he's kind of found that balance between developing high school signees and also supplementing it with the transfer portal. His hardline stance, it took its toll on Clemson's roster in the past. And then another thing that you don't read a whole lot, but my friends had told me they weren't crazy about Dabo Swinney replacing experienced coaches that he lost with just some ex-players that didn't have any type of coaching experience. That has been fixed. We know about the high-profile acquisition from Penn State and Tom Allen. So everything kind of in place here for Clemson. You throw in the schedule, it's favorable. Tricky road trips to Louisville, North Carolina, and Georgia Tech in a tough opener against LSU, preseason top 10 team, number 9 in both polls. But the Clemson Tigers will be favored in all 12 of their games this year. Paul, you like the Clemson Tigers to win the ACC?
Yeah, I mean, I'll tell you, Jimmy, it's not like the ACC is going to be easy pickings this year by any stretch of the imagination. But just looking over all the teams in this conference, the Tigers, to me, are head and shoulders above the rest of the league. You know, from a roster standpoint, you start at that quarterback position, and you talked about Cade Klubnik. For his first 2.5 years, I think a lot of Clemson fans were probably wondering, and college fans in general, whether he was ever going to live up to that 5-star pedigree that he came to Clemson with out of Austin Westlake High School, about 15 miles from the University of Texas campus. But late in the year, those last 4 or 5 games, he really came to life. It was almost like a switch flipped or something. He started playing well. And you mentioned the 2 games at the end of the year, big games, the ACC championship game against SMU, that 34-31 victory. And then against Texas, the Tigers did lose 38-24, but man, they lit that Longhorns defense up. And that Longhorns defense last year, one of the best in the nation for sure. So he really, came to be, I think, in the end of the 2024 season. And who knows what's in store, excuse me, for 2025. I think he'll only be better with confidence. They've got that veteran offensive line that you talked about. They've got one of the top receiving cores in the country. Their defense, you mentioned, they got five-star guys up front, defensive tackle Peter Woods, defensive end TJ Parker, one of the best defensive ends in the nation. Linebacker Sammy Brown was a five-star guy. So they've got a really good defensive group as well. This year, as far as their schedule, they avoid Miami. They get SMU there in Death Valley. They do have road trips, as you touched on, to Georgia Tech and Louisville, but they'll be favored by 6 points or more in both of those as we stand today. And outside of an injury to Klubnik, and he's proven himself to be durable to this point, I just don't see a world in which Clemson does not make it to the ACC championship game. I feel really good about that. I think they're the best team in the league. I think they've got a quarterback who found some confidence at the end of last year that will carry over to this year. And you mentioned Dabo Swinney and some of the criticism that he's faced, probably fairly. That he has not participated or was slow to participate in the new world, the new era of the transfer portal. But I'll tell you one thing about winning the transfer portal battle, in my opinion, is roster maintenance. And he maybe was not bringing in any players for those first couple of years, but he wasn't losing any to speak of hardly at all either. So that's a big part of it. He's got a veteran team. I think they're going to win the ACC. I like Clemson minus 125 to win the conference there at Bet Rivers.
Yeah, and I mentioned the trips to Louisville, North Carolina, and Georgia Tech as the toughest games on the schedule on the road within the conference. Yes, LSU, and then a trip to Columbia, South Carolina, where those teams, well, they get after a tough loss for the Clemson Tigers at home with Lenora Sellers on third and 16, scrambling in for the go-ahead touchdown with a minute and a half to go, and then in field goal range, Klubnik's pass is kind of tipped off a receiver into the hands of a defensive back for the Gamecocks, and they secure the victory before Clemson has a chance to tie it up with the field goal. But yeah, they minus 125. I could book this. They got the respect of the odds makers as well. They are going to, minus a Klubnik injury. They're going to be favored in all of the games this year. And if they get to Charlotte again, you can book it. They're going to be a lot steeper than minus 125 when you get there. So you can maybe even hedge a little or middle a little bit if they're a double-digit favorite. And we'll see about that when we get there. So Clemson minus the 125 available right now over at Bet Rivers. One of those road trips we talked about is my favorite pick in the ACC this year. And we talk about the Georgia Tech Yellow Jackets. Brett Pry and I have a little bit of a history, and that is my favorite win total 3 years ago was under 4.5 with Georgia Tech. They lost a lot, and the schedule was absolutely brutal. Well, they started out with the one rent a win against, I think it was Western Carolina, and got beat by 50 against Ole Miss, lost by multiple scores to Central Florida, and then they made the switch. And all Brent Key did was beat win 2 games as 3 touchdown underdogs at North Carolina and at Pitt. He won another one along the way. He finished with his when he took over winning conference record. They had to give him the job and rip the interim tag off. And what he's done it not with gimmicks, with hard work, and also riding the hot hand of another Texas high school quarterback prospect in Haynes King, the Texas A&M transfer. So they have King back. And boy, you talk about a guy that is a true dual threat. He's really tough. He runs behind his pads, and it also opens up some easier throwing opportunities for him. How about in 23? He threw 16 interceptions. He took care of the ball much more last year in 24. He went from 16 interceptions to just 2. His completion percentage was way up. So, and yes, to 2 of the losses last year, he was hurt against Notre Dame and Virginia Tech. The schedule, Georgia and Clemson, probably not going to win those games. I'm going to be flat honest. Not crazy about Georgia Tech trying to get the money as they control the gate, as they move it off campus to the Mercedes-Benz Dome downtown in Atlanta to lose some of their home field advantage there. And Clemson is just really loaded like we talked about. But the other 10 games, this team is favored. And so And the one thing I like about Key and is they really play behind their pads. They're a line of scrimmage team. This is not done with all kinds of gimmicks. It is really impressive what he's done. And when you do have sound football coaches, it's a gradual improvement of the really good ones. Georgia Tech's got a really real find here, and you wonder how long they'll be able to keep him if he continues to improve. 7.5 for a team that's favored in 10 games. I'm going to take the Georgia Tech Yellow Jackets. And not only that, Paul, but a singular game that I'm going to point to. I know you have one as well, but that's opening weekend where the NFL waits and they let the college football play a 5-day opening weekend from Thursday through Monday. Well, Friday night, we got a good one, and that is Georgia Tech making a trip to Boulder, Colorado. Yeah, that program out of Boulder gets a little attention from time to time, but the Colorado Buffaloes really their schedule ranking where it finished last year and where it's projected this year, it's increasing heavily. One of the biggest jumps in all of college football in schedule difficulty jump. This is one of the reasons. So many more pieces in place, a lot of continuity, tons of continuity. And, well, for Colorado, it's kind of that 7-on-7 flag football roster build there. They got a lot of skill position guys, but they don't have a whole lot of linemen. That lineman in an offensive line in their first game, they're going to have challenges to begin with. I love laying the 4 with the Georgia Tech Yellow Jackets at Boulder on that first Friday night. It's one of only a few games that are on that night, so we got to have action. So I like that one. But I'm bullish on the Yellow Jackets this year, and I love the job. I respect the job that Brent Key has done in Atlanta.
I'll tell you, starting with Brent Key, I think it was back in 2022. They fired Jeff Collins mid-year, and they decided to promote offensive line coach Brent Key to interim coach. And I think most people probably felt like that he would just finish out the year. They would do a nationwide search, and somebody else would take the head job. But I kind of equate it, and I don't know the exact year, but if you'll remember when Clemson, I guess it was when they
Dabo,
fired Tommy Bowden and they
that would be
skipped over
2009.
2009. They skipped over both
2008.
coordinators.
I'm sorry, Paul, because that was Saban's second year when he beat him in the opener when Bowd was preseason number 6. I'm sorry.
Okay, and they skipped over as far as their interim coach appointment. They skipped over the 2 coordinators, and they decided to hire a young wide receivers coach named Dabo Sweeney. And I think everybody thought that Dabo Sweeney would just be the coach till the end of that season, but history speaks for itself at this point. And I'm certainly not saying Brent Key's going to attain exactly that type of success in Georgia Tech. Historically, it's a more difficult do there in Atlanta, but he's done an exceptional job. He's a tough coach. He's an offensive line coach, and he's got a tough quarterback that kind of personifies, I think, his image on the field in Haynes King. He's a guy from my part of the neck of the woods in East Texas, played for his dad, John King, at Longview High School. If I'm not mistaken, they won a state championship during Haynes King's time there. So he's a gritty guy. They did lose a couple of key guys in wide receiver Eric Singleton, who went to Auburn. That's a vertical threat. I wish they had him. And I also wish they had Romello Hyde at defensive end. He's one of their better defensive players. He went to West Texas and took the money there at Texas Tech, as many have chosen to do. So, but they're still a strong team, like you're saying. And Colorado has a lot of changes, a lot of new people. Obviously, Travis Hunter, basically you're losing a first-team All-America on both sides of the ball with Hunter going off to the NFL. And then Shedeur Sanders, he was productive at quarterback. He was a good college quarterback. He took a heck of a beating. He kept on answering the bell, but they do have some challenges. They have been a really good home dog and a really good underdog period under Deion Sanders. So there's that to consider with, but a lot of people, including yourself, and I'm certainly on the edge of the bandwagon. This Georgia Tech's going to be one to watch during this team going to be one to watch during 2025.
Yeah, and it's certainly not identical to Joe Hamilton, back in the day. Talking about Haynes King, Hamilton was a little shiftier. Haynes King kind of finishes runs off behind his pads, being a, kind of a physical guy. But both are similar in that they're both dual threats. And dual threat sometimes is code for running quarterback, and it can't throw a lick. That's not the case. So and he has improved as a passer, and Just I, it's not the easiest place to win. It's just that simple. Georgia Tech is got some higher academic admission policies. A lot sometimes they relax them a little bit more than others, just like Notre Dame and some others. But anyway, it's a hell of a job that Key is doing in Atlanta. Let's go to one of your individual games, and we'll start off that opening weekend again, Paul. And it's the Sunday night game. And I love this Sunday night game because it's a standalone game, and it's kind of replaced that Monday night game as being the best matchup of the weekend. And the coaches are a little less prone to playing at Monday night for a shorter week. They'll play on Sunday, and we've gotten some really good matchups over the years. We got one here, and it's clearly Notre Dame's toughest game on their schedule. Miami is preseason number 10. They catch Notre Dame at home. Now, there will be some Notre Dame alums and their fan base, as much as, I don't know, a third of the stadium. It takes a little bit to get the University of Miami fan base to the stadium in droves. But Notre Dame, after all of their success last year, they're going to be highly supportive. And will that kind of deter a little bit of one of my favorite angles? A young quarterback making his first true road start in a hostile environment. How hostile is it going to be with a chunk of Notre Dame fans there as well? So, speaking of which, minus 2.5 is available right now over at Bet Rivers. It's a Sunday night standalone game. We got to bet it, Paul. You like the Irish?
Yeah, this game was 3, a few weeks ago, and it's kind of settled down at most stores now at minus 2.5, including here at Bet Rivers. I'm not a huge fan of taking a road favorite right off the bat against a quality opponent. Not so much as far as the home environment, so to speak, but just a guy who's he's not only made a start, CJ Carr or Kenny Minchie, Pete Nakos rather of On 3 reported earlier today that they're basically neck and neck. I certainly think CJ Carr is going to be the starter. I think coaches have to say certain things to keep all parties engaged in this day and age of college football. But CJ Carr, if he's the starter, he appeared in one game last year, and he's never attempted a collegiate pass. And Kenny Minchie, if he happens to win the job, he's thrown a grand total of 3 passes across the last 2 years. So Kenny Minchie, not exactly long in the tooth either there at quarterback for Notre Dame. But man, I tell you, outside of that, and of course, quarterback's probably the most important position, obviously in college football, but perhaps in all of sport, it's the most important position. But outside of that quarterback position, this Notre Dame team, even with the injury to Charles Jagasaw, who was hurt in an ATV accident in the summer and will miss the start of the season, even with that injury, man, they are loaded. They've got a top level defense. They are great at offensive line. They've got one of probably the second best running back room in all of college football, and they've gotten better at wide receiver. So they've got a lot of weapons. They don't have any clear weaknesses. Obviously, they're inexperienced at quarterback, but I like the supporting cast that he has and their ability to run the football. And talking about the Irish running the football, Jeremiah Love and Jadarian Price. Last year, they combined for almost 1,900 yards, averaged right at 6.6 yards per carry between them. And last year, in 2 games against pretty good running teams, Miami, they gave up a total of 477 yards total in games against Georgia Tech and Virginia Tech, gave up 6 yards a carry in those games. And I think Notre Dame's going to do a similar number to the Hurricanes with that running game. So it's a good offensive line. As I said, a great offensive line there for the Irish. That offensive line ranked 3rd best nationally by one publication. And looking at Miami, they're going to be debuting a new starting quarterback at their school as well in Carson Beck. Unlike CJ Carr and Kenny Minchie, Carson Beck's played a lot of football. He started a total of 27 games the past 2 years at the University of Georgia. He was really good in 2023. I thought the last half of 2023, he was playing about as well as anybody in the country at quarterback. But last year in 2024, not nearly as good. He threw 12 interceptions, just wasn't the same quarterback. Of course, he didn't have tight end Brock Bowers, didn't have wide receiver Ladd McConkey, but just wasn't the same guy under center. So I'm not sure what we've got in Carson Beck, but I think the Notre Dame, I think they're going to go in there to Hard Rock Stadium. I think they're the better roster. They're the better team. And I think they'll work and they'll, he'll perhaps walk before he runs at quarterback, CJ Carr or whomever the starter is. But I think Notre Dame's going to go in there and get a victory on Sunday, August 31st.
Miami spent a lot of money on Cam Ward getting him last year, and he was worth every penny. I mean, if Miami's shortcomings were not because they didn't score enough points or he didn't play well enough. I mean, he was outstanding last year. We know he became the number one pick. But some coaches who have to kind of you balance this budget and the more they spend on one player, that's taken away from an offer from to another player, and some coaches scratching their heads a little bit on what they gave Beck to get him in. So leadership characteristics a little bit questionable. Sometimes just some decisions on and off the field have been a little bit questions. He's got some arm talent, but we will see. It's not a given that he's going to have a great year, but we'll see. Notre Dame, I'm bullish on them because they got a great team, and when they were they were they were jilted pretty good when Brian Kelly left them. And so from the athletic director to the administration to everybody, and when and they have been more supportive. They've increased their budget on staff for NIL, the administrative admissions. Everybody's kind of all in. They did not want to, Brian Kelly leaving them to kind of have their program slide down a little bit. What has happened? It's just the opposite. There's no question. Brian Kelly did a great job of getting a team to a playoff twice, into a championship game one of those times. Once he got there, they could not compete. This team is competing way more, and they weren't on Ohio State's level last year, but they are just, the overall roster is more talented. Then nobody can gripe about that. And the other thing is they've reworked their schedule to kind of give them the best path to the playoff. And this schedule is more than favorable. This is the smallest favorite that they'll be all year. So they play two SEC teams. With Texas A&M at home, they're picked to finish 8th in the SEC. Arkansas is picked to finish 14th. They play two teams that are picked to finish last in their conference. In the Big Ten, they got Purdue. In the ACC, they got Stanford. So the highest team in the ACC the picked order of finish is Pitt at number 9. I mean, Boise State, Genty's gone. This is not the same team that Boise State had last year. How are they going to not be 10-2 with this schedule and with this roster this year? So minus 200. It's not my favorite price, but give me the Irish in this one for the to advance to the playoff this year, Paul.
Yeah, I'm with you. I mean, the schedule is quite favorable, to put it mildly. Although I think Texas A&M right now in some of the game of the year markets is 7-point underdog at South Bend. I've actually got A&M in my power rated top 10, as do a couple of other people. So I think that's a tough game. It's still overall they've got a very favorable schedule, as you pointed out there, game by game, and they're going to get somebody to play quarterback, especially again if there was ever a season that a team could build around the quarterback and support him and hold him up until it's time for the training wheels to come off, so to speak. This is the year for Notre Dame. They are just that roster is just ramped up. And Marcus Freeman, he was a little bit of a curious choice to many of us when they hired him to be the new Notre Dame coach. But man, you can't argue with the results. That guy has done an incredible job. He's recruiting at a huge level, and Notre Dame again has to be one of the contenders who could perhaps win it all in what I believe is really a wide open year for the national title.
Talking about the Irish too, and Kelly, you couldn't, I mean, as the betting favorite, he was 45-0, give or take a game. It was 44, 46, 45-0 at Notre Dame. So he won the games where he had the superior roster. Just didn't get the roster where they could compete at that next level. But then Freeman came in. You lose to Marshall, and you lose here. You lose a 21-point lead in the bowl game to Oklahoma State, and then people are like, "Man, we probably made a mistake here." But I do have a friend. It was actually Walker Howard, who's now he went to LSU, then Ole Miss, and now he's at University of Louisiana Lafayette. Highly recruited quarterback. Him and his dad went and visited. They were blown away with Marcus Freeman. They said to me, when they told me about their visit, like, this guy is impressive. And it was Brian Kelly who tried to hire him as a defensive coordinator, but he got the job. He got the job there. So it's he knows how to handle himself with the media, with the alums. He connects with the players. Being young, they kind of got to find in Freeman at South Bend. So yeah, kind of scratching our head about the process. You don't let that's more times than not that goes bad more than good when you let the players decide who your next coach is going to be. They always want the assistant that they're familiar with, but it took a little time, but it seems to be working out in South Bend. Let's move on and talking about finding a quarterback through the portal. And Paul, this one had me scratching my head, and this one was done very early because Darius Mensah from Tulane. You want to talk about another a true dual threat, man. He's a running threat. He throws the ball accurately. Boy, he was really, really good in his first year of starting as a redshirt freshman for the Greenies. They advanced to the conference championship game where they lost to Army, but still another good year for John Summerall in uptown New Orleans. And he goes to Duke. Oh, wait a minute. Auburn needs a quarterback. Oklahoma needs a quarterback. All these teams, Miami needs a quarterback. How does he go to Duke? Well, I don't know exactly what it was, but Duke stepped up to the plate. And it was a heavy price, and it was done decisively. It was done early, and it was never any like, well, Mensa might be thinking about here. He might be thinking about that. No, he was stuck at they got him in at Duke. Last year's Duke team they couldn't compete with that Ole Miss team in that bowl game in the Gator Bowl. And they only beat one team that finished with a winning record. That was UConn last year. Now they did beat three more ACC teams that finished 6-6 and lost a bowl game to finish 6-7. But Manny Diaz surprised me last year, and he's got just about everybody back. Talk about they finished first in the ACC in sacks, tied for tackles for losses, attacking style defense, and a lot of that defense is back. And then you talk about on the offensive side as well, pretty good. And look, they could use another receiver. There's no doubt about that. But when you add a guy like Mensah, who should only improve upon his level of play from his first year starting last year, and this over 6.5 looks very comfortable. The other thing I like the schedule. They 3 of the 4 worst teams in the ACC. They play them, and in a couple of layups, in my opinion. They're going to lose to Clemson. I don't think they have the roster to compete with Clemson, but that's 5-1, and the other 6 are 50-50 type of games. So I think they're going to go 3-3 in those and finish 8-4. Now, tricky non-conference games. Brett Bielema in the Illini. I love their team this year. They go to Durham to play there. And then Mensah makes a return to uptown New Orleans. They play at Tulane. Those are 50-50 games that the spreads are going to be very, very close. I think right now it's 2.5 Illinois over the Blue Devils there. And the other games are kind of 50-50 games as well. But Manny Diaz sometimes, and it wasn't pretty at Miami, but sometimes the second time around, lower expectation, lower pressure job can kind of settle in an experienced coach. I like the Blue Devils. I love their favorable schedule this year. 7.5, I think, is a low number. And I love Mensah, the quarterback, as well, Paul.
Yeah, I tell you, some teams obviously seems like routinely fail to meet expectations, but at least over the last few years, Duke first under the 2-year tenure of Mike Elko, and then under Manny Diaz last year seemed to be one of those teams that routinely exceed expectations. And certainly, I mean, when you talk about the 2025 Duke Blue Devils, you have to start with the quarterback position and how they've elevated it. They went out in the portal before the 2024 season and got Malik Murphy from the state of California, who was a backup at the University of Texas. They basically, after just one season, pretty much fired Murphy and sent him packing. He's now at Oregon State, and went after Darian Mensah, who had the big-time year as a redshirt freshman there at Tulane. So just on that trade-off alone, you'd expect the Duke team to be better this year. Mensah's a guy who is he's not going to run for 1,000 yards, but he does have escapability, his ability to move around in the pocket and be a threat to run. I think he's going to add a dimension to an offense that needs as many playmakers and as many ways to move the ball as possible. So I like the look. Duke's a team that, oddly enough, we won't count SMU because last year was their first year in the ACC. But over the last 3 seasons, there's only 2 teams in the ACC in conference play that have had a better record than the Duke Blue Devils, those being the Clemson Tigers and the Louisville Cardinals. And Duke is tied for third best record, 14-10 in ACC play over the last 3 years. So I think recent history and just looking at this team from a roster standpoint and the addition of Darian Mensah at quarterback, I like where you're going there. And I think it's always a good idea to expect Duke to do a little bit more than the market anticipates.
So I talked to one of my coaching buddies who said, I mean, where do they think that he's going to play? Point guard? I mean, they don't care about football at Duke. He said, Jimmy, they're actually kind of got some budget. They got some boosters to give them some money. We know Duke alums have some money, but getting them to put it toward the NIL budget for your team, your player budget. So it's going to be interesting to watch the Duke Blue Devils, not just this year. And listen, program like this, winning cures a lot of things. Winning helps a lot. So if they can continue to win, that would be interesting in Durham, North Carolina. Talk about schedules, man. You talking the ACC? Can it get any tougher than this? Um, let's see. At Clemson, at SMU, at Georgia Tech, which we love, at Miami, preseason top 10, at Notre Dame, who should be in the playoff, and okay, a neutral site game in Atlanta against Tennessee. That ain't gonna be neutral. That is basically a road game. Call it a neutral site or a game away from home. Syracuse Orangemen. Well, first year head coach Fran Brown, 10-3. Outstanding job. This is what you get this year. Those 6 games away from campus against those teams. Paul, I'll let you start first, but this is double barrel play. We both like Syracuse under 5.5, but I'll give you the floor first.
Yeah, I mean, you talked about the conference schedule, the road schedule. Those 5 road games plus the quote unquote neutral site game against Tennessee, those 6 games, they could be a double-digit underdog in all 6 of those games. And looking at those 6 teams, I think only one of them, Georgia Tech, is not in the preseason AP Top 25. And Georgia Tech's and others receiving votes. And some of us probably believe Georgia Tech should be in the top 25. So those are 6 really tough games, 5 true road games, one again, quote unquote, neutral site game there in Atlanta against really quality opponents. So I don't really see them winning any of those games. Again, they're going to be double-digit underdogs in all of those. And not only is it the schedule, even more so than that, kind of from my chair, it's just the roster attrition, the amount of productivity that's gone out the door. This was a team last year that leaned heavily on its offense, averaged a little over 34 points a game, 468 yards a game. Really good offensively. The quarterback, Kyle McCord, had come over from Ohio State in the offseason. He threw for almost 4,800 yards last year for the Orange, but he opts to leave for the NFL early. They lose their top 3 receivers from last year, some to the NFL, one through the transfer portal, maybe 2 through the transfer portal, the most notable being Trevor Pena, who's off to Penn State. I think he'll really help the Nittany Lions. But they lose 3 receivers last year who combined for 235 catches, 2,896 yards, and 23 touchdowns. So you got a quarterback who threw for almost 4,800, and those 3 guys that caught 2,900 yards of those passes, they're all gone. And then there's LaQuinn Allen, their running back, LaQuinn Allen. He not only rushed for over 1,000 yards in 2024, he did the same thing the year before in 2023. So you're losing a running back who's off back-to-back 1,000-yard seasons. And if that's not enough, 4 starting offensive linemen also out the door. So they're not averaging 34 points a game this year. They're probably averaging closer to 10 points fewer, maybe in the the neighborhood of 24 points. So this team, just so much roster attrition, so many people out the door, and then they get saddled with this schedule, which is one of the nation's toughest, actually ranked as the 5th toughest in all of college football by one publication. The juice is pretty heavy today at Bet Rivers, but I still, man, this is a 5-7 team at best. It could be a 4-8 team, but I like Syracuse to go under 5.5 regular season wins. You can find that today at Bet Rivers at -182.
And they got a couple of layups in there, but North Carolina, Pitt, and Duke all come to Syracuse. I mean, all of those teams could be. I mean, we don't know about North Carolina, but they should be improved. I mean, Pitt, Holstein's healthy. Look out, Duke. We just talked about Duke. I mean, so I can't see them running the table because I can't see them winning any of those. You talked about it with McCord, and I won't count McCord and the receiving yards, his passing yards and receiving yards. I won't count those twice, but that's 5,800 passing and rushing yards with McCord, Pena, Meeks, Gadsden, and Allen. 5,800 yards and 54 TDs. I mean, damn. I mean, that's that's ridiculous, man. And you talked about some of the others as well. So a little bit of a sophomore slip. No, this is a tough schedule. And McCord, and that was we wondered if Ohio State did the right thing because McCord, I mean, who was better, between Howard and McCord? McCord did not have a good game against Stanford or Pitt. There's no doubt about that. But man, the other ones, man, he lit it up. He lit it up, and he carried the Syracuse on. I love listening to Brown. I mean, he's a breath of fresh. He's not an excuse maker. He understands where they are in the pecking order. He knows we can't compete with Texas, but he's going to be good. Damn it, I don't care who it is. I mean, this is a tough assignment for the Syracuse Orange. So both of us under Syracuse 5.5 minus the heavy juice in that one, close to minus 182 as we look at it right there. Paul, your last one, we talked about it earlier, and we talked about the team that was on Notre Dame's schedule, one of the teams that are picked to finish last in their conference, and that's the Stanford Cardinal. Their total is 3.5, and you say, well, is it because they're just doing some weird things with their athletic department? It's kind of sad what has happened to the Stanford athletic department and the football program as a whole. Yes, they're still winning a lot of the non-profit producing sport championships. They won the Sears Trophy, the All Sports Trophy for years and years. It was almost a given. Some of the things they're doing, they just need better leadership as well. Sad what it's happening, and they don't fit at all in the ACC with Cal in that same category. But Stanford has 4 straight 3-9 seasons. So this is not just all due to their affiliation with the ACC and not being in the Pac-12 anymore. This thing started to fall apart before that. Now it's even tougher to maintain a roster and keep some of the others. Paul, you like Stanford under that low total at 3.5.
Yeah, I tell you, Jimmy, I talk often about in this age of college football, this new era of NIL and the transfer portal, that the rich will get richer and the poor will get poorer. And the poor in this case, in this scenario, are not only the so-called group of 5 schools, but the lower third or so schools in some of the Power 4 leagues as well. Those schools that, for whatever reason or combination of reasons, just don't have the financial commitment, the NIL dollars in this case, to be competitive. And that's certainly where I think Stanford stands. As you mentioned, 3-9 the last 4 seasons. They bring in one of their former favorite sons, Andrew Luck. He's their new general manager. And unless he's like, I'm going like Cameron Rising at Utah and just has limitless eligibility, I think Mr. Rising's finally finished his collegiate career.
Yeah,
But unless Andrew finds some additional collegiate eligibility and can suit up for the Cardinal, I think they're in for another long year. I mean, they lose. We won't go over all their personnel losses, but they lose one of their best defensive players, one of their best offensive players, David Bailey, their defensive end. I mean, he didn't get a whole lot of notoriety, but he was one of the better defensive ends in the entire ACC last year. And he, like so many, are headed to the South Plains of West Texas to play for the Texas Tech Red Raiders. And then Emmett Mosley, the fifth, their receiver, a big guy, like 6'4", 200 pounds. The last 3 games of last year, man, Mosley just lit it up. He had over 300 yards receiving total in those 3 games. A big physical guy, a heck of a blocker on the edge. He's off to the University of Texas, another program with obviously quite deep pockets. So they're getting poached by the likes of Texas Tech and Texas and many others, and they're just not able to keep their top players. And if that's not enough to add insult to injury, in late March, near the end of spring training, they lose their coach, Troy Taylor. is basically terminated by the school for allegedly mistreating female staff members. So he's out the door, and they bring in as their interim coach, former NFL head coach Frank Reich, NFL quarterback Frank Reich, to coach the Cardinal this year, and who knows, perhaps beyond. You look at their schedule, and I don't see a single surefire win. When the lines first came out for week one about 2 months ago, they were initially a 1.5, 2 point favorite in their opener at Hawaii, but that game has since crossed zero. And now I'm seeing Hawaii as much as a 3 point favorite. So the line shifted in that game. Hawaii now favored by 2.5 or 3, depending on where you look. So they'll be an underdog in that game. And there's really no clear cut game that they'll necessarily be favored in. As of today, home games against San Jose State and Cal are both around pick 'em. So they could either be a short favorite or a short underdog. But other than those, they're going to be double digit underdogs, obviously, in most of their games. They just don't have the talent to compete at the Power Four level. The heavy juice at minus 200 is a little bit of a little bit of a negative to this play. But I think 3-9 would be pretty good. I think they're more of a 2-10 team, really. But I like Stanford under 3.5 regular season wins, minus 200 at Bet Rivers.
What is going on? I mean, you'd say, well, Andrew Luck's one of their own, and it's funny that both of the Bay Area ACC representatives now, Cal and Stanford, the big rivalries, are doing so the same thing. Ron Rivera is back, sort of doing that same sort of duty for his alma mater over at Cal. But it's wait a minute, Frank Reich. I don't understand that. Well, Frank Reich, he played in the ACC, but he played for a team that's no longer in the ACC, Maryland. Not only did he engineer that unbelievable comeback for the Bills against the Houston Oilers, the biggest comeback in the NFL playoff history, but he also had one of those when he was in college against the University of Miami back in their heyday, and for the University of Maryland. But Maryland's now in the Big Ten. Frank Reich is going in the ACC school, but it's on the West Coast. You figure it out. And in all of that, Bill Belichick is coaching in the ACC this year. I am not even going to try and figure out what's going to happen there. I would think they're going to block and tackle better. They're going to have better, stronger football IQ. They're going to understand situational things. He's not going to mismanage the clock and all that. But some of the distractions that are happening in Chapel Hill, has some people wondering if they're getting the same Bill Belichick that they thought they did back in his day. So Louisville, man, they went to Clemson and whooped them. I know Clemson's looking forward to that one going back. Miller Moss lands there. And then the kid who had such a great year but threw up on himself in Happy Valley, the quarterback for SMU, he's back, but he loses a lot around him for SMU. But we think in this new landscape of roster building in college football, SMU is going to be just fine. Maybe a little bit too much on his shoulders this year, but I think he's going to build and maybe even have a little motivation after that poor performance in the playoff on the biggest stage.
Yeah, I'll point this out. Now, I'm a college football specialist. People who know me know that I don't follow the NFL that close, but I think Frank Reich, didn't he maybe play with Andrew Luck at Indianapolis?
That coached him. Coached him, huh?
Coached him. Well, that's
okay.
where their their relationship is.
There we go.
Okay.
Connect
the dots there, right? So SMU, I don't know that they're going to be quite as good. I think they're going to take not a significant drop, but they lose Smith, the running back transfer from Miami, Florida, rushed for about 1,300 yards last year. And they also lose several members of that front seven of the defense that was quite good. So I think SMU is going to take a little bit of step back. It's going to be critical that they get a healthy RJ Maryland, their tight end. Man, he was one of the best tight ends in the country last year until he got hurt around midseason, maybe game 5 or so, and was out the rest of the year. I believe he's fully healthy. That would give Jennings a big time weapon there if he's at 100% health. And then Louisville, Louisville's a team that, I think maybe they've lost a little bit defensively as well. That concerns me. And their quarterback, Miller Moss. I mean, USC, Caleb Williams wins the Heisman Trophy. He doesn't play the bowl game. They're going to go to the transfer portal, it looks like, and get a quarterback. But then Miller Moss for USC against Louisville has a huge bowl game. Threw for, I believe, almost 400 yards. They decided not to go to the portal. And so Miller Moss, the starter for most of last year for USC, but just didn't play all that well. And I just wonder, I know Jeff Brom's kind of the quarterback whisperer, so to speak, but I have a little bit of concerns about Miller Moss as a top shelf ACC quarterback. So I think Louisville might drop off as well. And what it all could mean is, a team, again, like Georgia Tech might be able to sneak up the league's pecking order a little bit when nobody's watching.
Thank you for bringing that up to my attention. I had to do a little fact checking right there, Paul. But yes, after Frank Reich ran the offense for the Eagles when they upset the Patriots in the Super Bowl, he was hired a couple of days after that to coach the Colts. He coached Luck for one season. Luck retired right before the start of their second season in 2019. So there you go. We'll put our two heads together. We'll figure this stuff out. But each and every Tuesday and Thursday. Now that's just not for the conference previews, but that's for our picks during the regular season as well. So we're done with the ACC today. On Thursday, it'll be the Big 12, and then we'll get to the rest of the group of five collectively next Tuesday, and then it'll be picks for week 0 next Thursday. But it's live right here at College Sports Rush YouTube channel every Tuesday, Thursday, 4 p.m. Eastern with myself and veteran college football handicapper Paul Stone. I guess I'm a veteran too, huh? A little bit of everything. I bet everything though, not just college football. So for Paul Stone, I'm Jimmy Ott. We'll see you on Thursday at 4 p.m. Eastern.